Welcome to a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms new dawn today. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're unpanned. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I am the legacy of Jennifer Kaiser, and this is another edition, a special edition of Legacy News. Welcome to Legacy News. The Legacy Ride is back at it again for your Monday evening, recorded Monday morning. As you can see, with the difference in the sunlight glaring at both of our faces, although he's in a closet, so it's eliminating from artificial light. Get some sun, man. Get out of the basement. Get some vitamin D. Night shifters.
I get it. My sunlight comes naturally with my bald head. It just reflects.
Reflecting. That's Andrew Joseph, by the way. I am Zachary Kaiser. Welcome in. This is a special, very, very special edition of the Legacy Right, or a Legacy News. This is everything is the Legacy Right here on this program. This is our Legacy News special, but this is a special edition. This is your only Legacy News episode for the week. No Crypto Wednesday this week.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, guys. We'll be back with Crypto Wednesday next week, but enjoy this one and share this everywhere this week, because I think this is something that we need to discuss, and we're going heavy-handed into what's just built inside of us. It really is. I think we're programmed by our design, because we are in his image, to question realities, and we can question him as well. He allows us to question him. In fact, he wants us to question him. But we also have to be willing to question everything that's going on in the realities of the day, and why it is in in defiance of him. It all comes back to that first temptation in the garden, no matter whether or not you want to use it as an interpretation of allegory, or if you're a creationist that perceives that what is said in Genesis is exactly how it unfolded. Depends on your interpretation. I think on a metaphorical expanse, we are referring to the element that all human beings are corruptible in the choices that they make.
Yeah.
And I think when we look into most recent history, especially when it comes to the United States and the narratives that are shed of light, I think there's a boomer deception. And I think it,
As the title of the video we're about to watch is called. It's really kind of a reflection of. I want to say the channel is black-pilled, right? But it's more like a reflection of the consequences of our behavior. Consequentialism is the philosophical
well, let me
framework.
tell you about let me tell you about consequences and the temptation of Eve before we jump in, and we'll jump in and dive in and give our perspective in this video as well. But the aspect of Eve uh, being tempted in the garden truly shows why the serpent chose Eve, and I think the serpent chose Eve not because she's a woman. Everybody that wants to blame women and create this misogynist, sexist idea that we need to blame women for Eve's betrayal in the garden and cause this uproar of division between the sexes. That's not the truth. The truth is Eve was much easier for the serpent to tempt on the fact that Adam had the direct connection to God. God created Adam first. He then created Eve second from a piece of Adam for Adam so that Adam could have companionship within the garden. And thus, it is much easier to say that the serpent targeted Eve as the temptation towards feeding off the apple, taking the fruit from the forbidden tree of truth and knowledge, because she had though an indirect connection to God, she did not have the direct connection to God. She didn't have the connection of relationship with God that Adam had. So it would have been much harder for the serpent to target Adam in bearing the fruit, into tempting to his lust of desire to be one and equal to and even higher and superior in the same form of God. That's the temptation. We are equal in standard to God. We are not. We are his children. He is our father. Another allegory to the concept of the tree of life and the tree of forbidden truth and knowledge is the aspect of consequence and what parents should be doing with their children. Think of God as a father and Adam and Eve as a child. We are rambunctious. We do not listen. The aspect of a parent is to raise their children to think and understand reality and come up with their own concepts, but at the same time understand that through your choice of action there will be consequences, and through those consequences there will be retribution to the negative actions. If you follow a path of negativity, you will fulfill a self prophecy of negative action. If you follow in a more positive light and be motivated in doing good, then you will have good follow you everywhere you go. Does it mean that bad things won't occur? Of course, bad things will occur. Bad things always occur. This world is chaotic. There is good and there is evil. You will always make mistakes. But at the same time, you have to understand that whatever you do has consequence, good or bad. There will always be consequences to the choices that you make in your life. And I think that is the allegory, the metaphorical speak of what the temptation in the garden eh, describes, is the fact that God grants you this free will, but he adamantly tries to raise his children to understand the concept of consequence to your actions. And he says, you may take from this tree, but you may not take from that, or there will be consequences to your actions.
And to call back to one of Lysander Spinner's works, Vices Are Not Crimes, every action has a fork, right? It's either going to be a virtue or a vice.
Hmm. Yes,
And
yes,
it
virtue
feeds
and
off of what
vices.
you're just saying.
Yep, virtues and vices. I mean, the virtue of goodness, righteousness, and then the vices of viciousness against oneself. It's not about, I mean, which can often lead to uh, being unkindly. Let's just put it lightly on that one, to other people. So when you are vicious against yourself in fulfilling the missing desires and pleasures of yourself, trying to find happiness, those vicious cycles will eventually relocate towards you being vicious towards others. Because if you hate yourself, you're inevitably going to hate others.
The
It's just
term is
it's
compound interest.
okay, banker. Okay.
Well,
Compound
it's
interest.
consequences. Yeah, compound. The consequences have a compound, and
Hmm.
it delivers itself on the way
Hmm.
you're exposed to other people.
And let's take this to a libertarian or libertine perspective. Nobody is telling you that you cannot do what you damn well please. You are free as a human being, and there is no law. As much as the government wants to portray it, there is no law because those in government are above the law that they manufacture and try to create as moral. Um, there is no law. You can do as you please, but you have to do so with a responsible technique. You have to be mature about it. If you are not, then you will fall into the vicious cycle to where you do things that are relative. And moral relativity is a fallacy. If you believe that morals are relative, then that means everything is subjective and there is no good or evil. There is no right from wrong. It's just I can basically say, doesn't matter if Andrew thinks that me killing my neighbor is wrong and I shouldn't kill my neighbor just because I don't like his face. Who gives a flying fuck what Andrew thinks? His perception of reality is you don't kill your neighbor because you don't like his face. My perception of reality, I'm going to blow his fucking head off. Excuse me, YouTube. I'm using this as a comparison and a contrast. Okay. So don't get your panties up in a bunch. All right. Check us out on Rumble if this ends up getting taken down. But that's the exact, yeah, that's moral relativism. You think in a box, everything is relative. You don't think outside. When you think in morality, where there is an objective truth, then morality is subjective within the choices that we make because you do have free will. So somebody may perceive that what they believe is right could be wrong upon someone else's objections, but at the same time, where there's still the acknowledgement that there will always be this objective truth. God gives us free will. We have the basis to be able to choose up on that free will what we do morally. And that could be good, that could be evil. That is the subjective nature of individuality, is choosing what is right from wrong from our own subjective mind. But you still have to realize, once you realize there is an objective truth, you'll start understanding, well, maybe I am actually choosing the wrong path. So morality is subjective, but truth is objective. Good and evil is subjective, right from wrong is subjective. Don't get it twisted. The right from wrong is the free will. I
Are you
know it's
implying that
complex.
there's an argument for universally preferred behavior?
There is an argument for universally preferred behavior. There certainly is.
Oh
because
God.
so let me put it this
I
way.
just marked another one. Everyone on the internet knows now. He's one of
Yeah.
them.
Let, let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. Most people believe that murder, rape, and robbery are wrong, correct?
In
But
Western
yet,
societies, yeah. Eastern
but
societies,
people,
it's not so clear cut. Depends on which society you're talking about.
because Eastern philosophy actually has that moral relative idea. Truth is subjective. It's how I feel. One reason why Eastern societies are susceptible to communism, because you can create a collective society where the state or a monopoly force comes in and dictates the morality upon a subjective notion, playing off the perception that everything is relative. So that is where Eastern philosophy gets it wrong. Now, I will say we need to play on.
He wants to play with himself.
Yes, Thomas Merton
Well,
actually discusses this. So we do need to understand that perhaps we can take the good effects of Eastern philosophy and apply it to our Western society. You get what I'm
I mean,
saying?
that's what an experiment is all about, right?
Hmm. But I mean, as far as what the East perceives, is morality subjective? Is everything relative to where it just depends on what my culture believes over this culture, and everything just gets condensed into one? um that is where we get into trouble. And if you look at it in today's society, and I think this video describes it perfectly, it defines it very well. We're taking more of an element because we have become secularized a little too much. The Enlightenment was a mistake. Liberalism, in its truest sense, was a mistake on the fact that we're trying to forge an ideal of reason and logic and apply it relative to that of morality. So we are taking the East, and a lot of that Eastern mystic ideology um, is coming into the realness of the fulfillment of prophecy in the West.
Yeah, I can understand, having an argument for that.
And it also makes sense why the ancient Hebrews were in what is referred to as the Near East, or the Middle East today. Middle East, West, where West meets East. And the idea of monotheism for what it is today began with the ancient Hebrews and goes on from there. So there's always been a battle philosophically between the East and the West, and I think the Middle East, or the Near East, with the concepts of what the Hebrews bring from the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, the Old Testament, um, and then implied and reinforced in the New Testament of the Bible for Christians, is applying that balance. It's attempting to find that balance between East and West. East and West. Heart to heart,
Mm.
my heart to God's heart. Yin and yang, motherfuckers.
Well, I guess I'm getting citizenship by investment going to Turkey. I'll see you later. I mean, Hoppa's there.
I mean, to be fair, where did Christianity truly formulate at, like, as a foundation of a church institutionally?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me, Zach?
Where was the Council of Nicaea held? Where did
I'm not
Paul
particularly
in his
strong
missionary?
in religious knowledge, so you have to forgive me.
Well,
I'm retarded.
Nicaea was Nicaea was a city within the Eastern Roman Empire in what is now Turkey, Asia Minor, or Ionia, whatever, what have you. But it was a city in Asia Minor under the Roman Empire of the East. Nicaea is in Turkey. So technically, the Christian foundations forged of where it became today, and how they canonized, where the canonization of Christianity became, and the foundations of the institutions of the religion was enforced, was at Nicaea, and later on at the Council of Constantinople, the capital, or New Rome, as it would be referred to actually by most of the Eastern Empire. The
Damn
West would refer
Canadians,
it
they
to
ruined bacon.
those fucking Canadians. But but that yeah. So and if you look into the letters of Paul and Acts, most of the traverse of Paul's missionary work was around Asia Minor and into Greece as well. So Christianity, for its foundational purposes as a religion, as the religiosity of the institution, began actually in Turkey.
So I was right.
You're
Okay, I'll
exactly
see you
right.
soon.
So if you want to, so by all means, go to Turkey. We need people like you in Turkey, considering the Turks are still very, very endowed to their Islamic ideas in a secular fashion because it's the Marxists using the Muslims as useful idiots.
We need more Erdogans in the world. I got it.
Mm-hmm. So with that, before we jump in, anything more to say for
No, man. I mean,
your philosophical mind?
I really enjoy some of these older videos from Blackfield, and this is one of my favorite ones. So I hope everybody else enjoys it too.
Well, with that, everybody, we'll see you in just a moment. Enjoy the show as much as we will. I think you'll be very intrigued if you haven't seen it.
As much as the baby boomers fought to overturn and rebel against and eventually destroy the American culture that existed before them, one thing that I have always found interesting is how much these same champions of counterculture that sadistically dismembered their heritage and mocked every tradition their parents had gifted them would at the same time romanticize this same culture they worked so hard to undo. In the 1980s and 90s, there were a flurry of television shows and movies that seemed to acknowledge a yearning for something, a not so quiet acknowledgement of a loss that nobody could quite put their finger on, a bitter regret that was much more than anything that could be explained away by the phenomenon of nostalgia. While these homages to a paradise lost forever sometimes included, a little bit of ridicule of their favorite boogeyman, the puritanical patriarchy that always had been the thankless guardians of this now extinct culture, there did exist a recognition, a deep remorse even, that these were the good old days. One of the most popular examples was even called Happy Days. But unfortunately, Pandora's box had already been opened. The genie could not be stuffed back into the bottle. The monster that the baby boomers had unleashed would grow and mutate and seek to preserve itself, something it could never do if everyone was looking back and quietly asking themselves if perhaps, just maybe, they'd made a terrible mistake. After this period of longing that went on for about a decade, it wasn't that long before these fantasies had to be distorted. Something that was
The grave mistake was the boomers had too much gay sex. Moving on.
easier to do once those who lived through the era grew old and the memories began to fade. After a while, the sadness began to turn into bitterness. And as one might expect, the yearning was replaced with mocking and ridicule, like a spurned lover who finally gets past the grief stage and as a coping mechanism has to convince themselves that there was nothing good about their ex that they once loved. They have to pervert every memory they had of their time together to fit this new narrative that they're better off without them, that they had simply outgrown them. But it wasn't just important for the baby boomers to forget and smear the past they had thrown away to help them survive and get on, although in a very real way, it was about self-preservation. You see, a new generation was growing up now, growing up in a completely different world. the new normal that had been crafted by the baby boomers. A world of broken homes, of a broken society filled with broken people. They had smashed everything with the hammer of revolution without ever bothering to rebuild anything in its place. And now this new generation, raised in the rubble and smoldering ashes of the baby boomers' devastating culture war, they were looking at these images of nuclear families with attentive and loving parents, affordable schools you could pay your tuition just by having a summer job at the corner store. The corner store that didn't have any bulletproof glass, and if you didn't have enough money to pay your bill, it was okay because everyone knew and trusted each other. They lived in communities with a shared culture and history. They knew each other by name. They didn't even lock their front doors.
What happens in society, Andrew? Why is
Well,
it that we don't trust anymore?
just going off of what he's talked about so far, I'm reading Type 4, individualist, bohemian, complex PTSD. That's basically what I'm reading from the video so far.
PTSD from what?
Just repeated traumatic events that people had to suffer for because somebody else didn't have the time to take responsibility and consider how their actions were playing out and affecting other people.
Are you talking about the boomers have PTSD?
No,
Because they got everything.
No, I know that's what I'm saying. Is it the generation that came? What he's talking about is the generation that came after the boomers.
And why do you think the boomers wanted to relegate away from that safety net of order and security and trust and relationship? Why would they want to run away from that and rebel? What was so wrong with the order of society then?
There's no resistance holding them down, and so they can achieve all the things they ever wanted in life without any control over, performance.
Define resistance. What do you mean there was no resistance?
Well, I mean, they won World War II, right? And there was no realistic, control from outside parties saying, "Look, you gotta." It's like I was talking about in last week's episode, China, how they went and said, "Hey, look, we're communists, man. We don't do that. What you're doing in North Korea. I want to put golden statues of the glorious leader." There's no self control. There's no accountability.
So what do you mean there was no World War II? Like most boomers, as they were coming of age, like older boomers especially, they were typically drafted and entered into the army to go to Vietnam. So what are you talking about World War II? When
I'm
they
saying
had their
after
own, they had Vietnam. They were forced into that scenario, but you could
they were.
theoretically say they were forced with World War II as well.
I'm talking about as a government program, effectively.
You could argue the same thing with World War II as a government program. And people were massively manipulated to have this patriotism to volunteer or accept their draft, because there was probably more people drafted during World War II, not just enlisted. In order to accept this high, superior, thou patriotic element towards going against evil. Well, wouldn't you say the same thing with Vietnam? Because we're trying to rid the communist threat from Vietnam and repel the North from taking over the South, and inevitably reconquer the North when we get them in their weakest point.
Well, I'd like to address your first point. World War II, there was a lot of resistance in the society, and the fact that there was the Great Depression, and they mismanaged the economy by manipulating it. So you can go back further to the dollar, and it's the way they manipulated it with the Federal Reserve.
So it's an opposite effect, because they effectively manipulated the economy after World War II as well to have to have
It's
a
a
boom, whereas they were in a
it's a pi
bust
it's a
cycle.
pivot. Yeah, it's a pivot.
So because the manipulative fake economy that we had, that brought us into a boom cycle, was culminating and teetering into that element to where we were starting to see the cracks in that foundation as the boomers were coming to age. And because of those cracks, the boomers don't know how to adjust from the previous generation that were coming of age prior to World War II, because they knew nothing more than effectively
The
perfect
riding the wave of
paradise.
success. Yeah, riding the wave of success.
But they knew paradise. So why wouldn't they want to work harder to preserve that paradise? Instead, they folded, it seems, and went and rebelled against that paradise
Well, like I
in
said,
order to try to.
there was no real resistance to, all the things that they could achieve. They were
So
living
what?
in a prestigious time where they could do whatever they wanted to as a political movement.
So what you're saying is the boomer generation are just literal retards.
I mean, when you're being, free with other people's money, really, are you concerned about the consequences?
Spoiled brat culture.
You know,
Spoiled brat culture. Yeah,
spoiled
spoiled brat
brat,
syndrome.
8-4, Enneagram 8-4.
So anything else to add to this, or shall we continue?
I mean, I'd like to keep going. I think it's the more we watch, the more we can kind of break it down.
Will do.
What's more, everyone was happy. And they were happy without drugs, without antidepressants, without casual sex. What would this new generation, exposed to these images, what would they think if they saw this time, this place that now seemed like some kind of mad utopia, and realized that it was gone? Or more importantly, why it was gone. Imagine the terror, the panic that the baby boomers felt standing over the corpse of this beautiful and lost culture. The murder weapon still in their hands, dripping with blood, as Generation X, dazzled by this wonderful paradise that so starkly contrasted the reality they knew, began to slowly piece together what it was that had happened. So like a deer in headlights, the baby boomers, fearing what would happen if they didn't, decided to hide the body. The movie Pleasantville was just one of the many tools they used to bury the body. The campaign weaponized against Generation X. The best way to explain it is that the baby boomers acted the same way a brutal dictator might act. But instead of it being Kim Jong-il banning all Western media in North Korea and telling his people that everyone beyond their borders was in some nightmarish hellscape and that North Korea was the true utopia, something he had to do, because if the people were to discover the truth, they might overthrow him, or worse. The boomers, using the same formula and reasoning, told Generation X that the 1940s and 50s, despite what it might look like on TV, was really a nightmarish hellscape full of misogyny, patriarchy, oppressive religion, and worst of all, whiteness. The baby boomers often explained how they had brought revolution and fought the man, and now these times were the real utopia. They told Gen X this again and again as they subjected them to this never-ending celebration of the free-loving 60s and 70s. And then to make sure it stuck, they institutionalized it with cultural Marxism as part of the curriculum. Pleasantville was written and directed by Gary Ross, who incidentally worked on Ted Kennedy's presidential campaign, as well as the campaigns of Michael Dukakis and both of Bill Clinton's presidential runs. He comes from a Jewish family that's been working in Hollywood for generations and has written and directed several films, including his first film, Big, which he wrote but didn't direct, and most recent film, Ocean's 8, that he both wrote and directed. The movie begins its assault on the baby boomers' murder victim by mocking the era of the 1950s with an over-the-top 1950s sitcom similar to Leave It to Beaver. The name of the town where the husband and wife and 2 children live in their 1950s home that most of you watching would never be able to afford, especially on a single income. In a perfect neighborhood where everyone is happy. We're briefly introduced to this show as we watch a promo that's obviously being played in present day or because this movie is 20 years old, 1998, on a cable network that plays old TV shows. It's an advertisement for a Pleasantville marathon. After the promo gives us a quick overview of the show, which of course is dripping with irony, making fun of how quaint and backwards the 1950s was, setting the stage for the rest of the movie. The film then quickly contrasts the 1950s pleasantness with shots of 1998 to try to elicit
I just got to add something before we go further. What is with the mythos of wanting to go back to the 1950s? Because honestly, in my opinion, I wouldn't want to go back to the 1950s. I would want to go back and live in the 1850s. Perhaps I'm just wild at heart. Rest in peace, David Lynch. Perhaps I understand that in the 1850s it was a little bit easier for me to just go forth on an adventure on my own right and settle out in the middle of the wilds of the frontier and start a homestead without any interference, start my family, have the town of maybe a day or 2 days ride away. So if I need to go to town, I just know that I got to take time. But other than that, my world is on my homestead. My family is on my homestead, and I can just live life and work and just live, right? So what is it
Yeah.
with the idea of our culture today, whether they're looking at it at a lens of positive or negative? Why do we look back at the 1950s being that mythos of what culture, what was lost in culture in some capacity, whether it's on a negative or a positive?
Well, let's say the 1950s is the last state of what we would call normal society.
Hmm.
Uh,
Wasn't normal
it's the
though. I can assure you, my grandfather was a womanizing
uh,
piece of shit.
well, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying relative to what we've been dealing with the last couple of decades, at least. You know, it
Mm,
really started off with the 60s, like the late 60s, early 70s.
mm,
It's went from a normal society, quote unquote, type 6, to a revolving door of 478. Where it's always some kind of episode, there's always some kind of change, and there's no stability. It's like a rolling tumbleweed. There's no consistency whatsoever. The only consistency is it's inconsistent.
inconsistent to what?
Well, I mean, there's no real foundation. There's no stability for people to catch their breath.
Are you saying the civil rights movement was a mistake?
I'm saying that was one of the things that was a mistake in the era.
I disagree. I think the civil rights movement was actually a great idea. I think it got hijacked by politics and
I think it was
legislation.
political to begin with. So
I don't think so. I think I think politics got involved, sure, but I mean, put it in the shoes of blacks at the time, prior to the era of what we call the civil rights movement. There were civil rights movements even before the slavery was ended.
yeah,
You get what I'm saying? Mostly because like blacks in the North were effectively second class citizens. They were taxed, sort of like what the Muslims perceive the Christians and the Jews. If they want to keep their customs, they must pay on behalf of the jizya. so that they can stick to their customs and their culture and their religion and not have to convert to Islam. And with that, you're free to do what you can, but just note you're probably going to be blamed for certain avenues that occur within that culture, and beaten and potentially and ultimately killed, because you're not a Muslim. But that's effectively, if you look at it like that, that's effectively what blacks in the North were, freed blacks. Those who went to the North and were freedmen in the North, they were second class citizens. Even in the South as well. So all over the country, freedmen were. Yeah, the difference and this is very surprising, is blacks in the South were more. It was more noted that blacks in the South, freedmen in the South, actually could own property, whereas they couldn't own anything. They couldn't even really work up in the North. They had, yeah, but they were taxed. They had their jizya, but they could not vote on either side of the spectrum, North or South. So there was an idea that perhaps we need to start fighting for our freedom in some way and subvert this system that's holding us down. You get what I'm saying?
I
Now,
do.
I will say, yeah, I will say that in the mid 1950s, the modern idea of the civil rights movement that came to fruition was a little bit more politicized. I don't think it had anything that was organic about it. I think the original civil rights movement had effectively been uprooted. If it wasn't uprooted because of Jim Crow, uh, it was at least balanced, I guess, prior to the 50s beginning of the politicized civil rights movement.
Well, I mean, it is a struggle session, right? I mean, this has been a struggle session since, after the ending of slavery, and even before
Mm,
then. It's about them trying to forcefully integrate people and not giving them a choice. It's kind of
mm.
like, in video game technology, people say, "Oh, you don't have to update, but you don't get access to all these features," right? So you're splitting hairs and saying, "Well, you're not a real whatever, and if you don't agree with me, then I'm gonna use force to get you to come along with me, in an involuntary way." So that's what I'm saying is political, is that you were never given an option. I mean,
You
this
really
goes back
weren't.
to the
Yeah, yeah, I
this
mean,
goes back to the Constitution, right? I mean, you were they made a decision on your behalf, and it lasts until the end of the time or the end of the country, one of the two.
yeah, but slavery's been a stain on human history and human
It has.
civilization since the
I'm not
dawn
saying
of
it hasn't.
everything. So,
I'm just
I
saying that
mean,
people make decisions on the behalf of other people without realizing the consequences of those decisions or willfully ignoring it. The
isn't that
Thomas Jefferson's got that quote, right? He said, "If you got a wolf by the ear, you're going to get screwed either way. If you let go, there's a chance he can attack you, and if you don't let go,
mm,
then there's going to you you're in for a tough time too. So
well,
you're gonna have to make a decision and stick with it."
that goes back to the allegory of the temptation in the garden. You've taken the
Yeah.
fruit and you've taken a bite out of it, and you've lost all concept of consequence because now you have to live your consequence. You finally got to know what that consequence is, but you're still denying that there's consequences.
Yeah.
And so that's one reason why there has been a struggle. I mean, you can also look into the Bible towards the allegory of the Tower of Babel. I mean, where the nations were dispersed to other parts of the world and began, yeah, after, yeah, as they were cursed to speak in other languages, other tongues. So now we can't unify. That goes back to the allegory, the parable, or the literal interpretation, if you want to literally interpret it that way, of of the temptation in the garden.
Yeah.
Let us continue.
superior feeling out of the audience. Several quick shots of the new hip America, including a shot of the new edgy fad of the time, which was a tongue ring. We see how different everything is, including the demographics. We're now introduced to our main character, who's kind of a nerdy white kid in suburbia. This is followed by a succession of scenes that kind of paint a very dark future for this young man and the people in his age group. First, we go to a man giving a presentation to the students. He's literally saying what boomers have been unapologetically telling everyone from Gen X through Z for the last 2 decades. Of course, salaries and opportunities are going down. That's why you just need to try harder, kids. And then we go to a classroom where a teacher is telling her class about the dangers of getting AIDS. The panic of heterosexual AIDS was, of course, all the rage back then. There was this big propaganda push to try to tell everyone that heterosexual AIDS was a huge problem. And they did that to increase the funding because the public saw it accurately as mostly a risk that gay people faced, which statistically speaking, it pretty much is. But at the time, it was AIDS this and AIDS that because they needed to scare some money out of the public and they hadn't yet normalized homosexuality. So nobody really felt a real obligation to pay millions of dollars into research into a disease they saw as only affecting a small portion of the population. We then go to another classroom. This teacher is talking about climate change. Back then it was global warming. Wait, nope. It was the ozone layer, where they wrongly predict that by 2010, the global temperature is going to skyrocket and kill everybody. So right away, we had this contrast between this 1950s happy but little cheesy and over-the-top past and this kind of dark, scary present that our main character, David, lives in. Now, after school, we go to David's home in the suburbs. Rows upon rows of McMansions occupied by baby boomers. Now, David is watching an episode of Pleasantville while his single mother baby boomer mom is chatting on the phone about her social life in the kitchen. It's obvious to the viewer that David wants nothing more than to be in that world on the television screen, to have a mother who pays attention to him and a father that, well, a father. This really demonstrates what I'm talking about. There's this generation that this isn't even a memory to them. It's completely foreign to him, but something deep inside him wants to be a part of that. So the next day, David is at school and he's telling his friend about how much he likes Pleasantville and how the TV network is going to play a Pleasantville marathon. There's a trivia contest and he's going to try to win the $1,000 prize. We also meet David's sister, who's a basic thought. Unlike David, who yearns to have a part of the past, she's a complete hedonist. She embraces this new culture, and she invites the cool kid from school to come home to her house afterwards so they can have sex because her baby boomer mom is going out of town to party with some young guy. This, by the way, wasn't exactly atypical. I had a lot of friends that had a similar situation. They had a single mom. They had a big house that their dad, who they never saw, was paying for. And the mom would just leave and party and let them do whatever they wanted in the house. So unfortunately for Generation X, Y, and Z, these are pretty typical kids. So that night they get...
I believe they call that hedonism.
Type 7 and Type 2. See Penny from The Big Bang Theory.
I mean, she was a skank.
Get into a fight over who can use the TV remote, and it breaks. And then magically, the doorbell rings, and a crazy TV repairman played by Don Knotts, who was a regular in many 1950s TV shows. And after quizzing David on some obscure details about Pleasantville, he reveals a magic remote control, and the magic remote control somehow transports them into the episode of Pleasantville that they're watching. So I know the beginning's pretty cheesy or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's trying to get them from 1998 into this TV show. It's just a stupid plot device. Don't worry about it. So now they're in this TV show, and they've taken the place of the son and daughter that are in that TV show. And after some discussion, they decide, well, they ought to play along because David knows so much about the show anyway. At first, it seems like it's going to be kind of just your typical fish out of water story, but they immediately go after the fact that this new 1950s mother, who, in sharp contrast to their 1998 baby boomer mom, who is off doing God knows what with her younger man, is attentive and caring. They make fun of the fact that their new mother had prepared breakfast for them by exaggerating the portions to make the idea that their mother making breakfast for them is this completely over the top and insane thing. David's sister, Jennifer, hates this new world and complains endlessly about how she wants to go home and have sex with the guy from school that she invited over. David convinces her to play along, but she only agrees after meeting a cute boy from Pleasantville. So now we get a quick tour of Pleasantville. Nothing bad ever happens. You see, it's very important to exaggerate this aspect of the world. This is how the baby boomers have to deconstruct it. When Generation X looks at this world and they see a utopia, so the only way to tear it down is for the baby boomers to say, yeah, it is a utopia. It's too perfect. Can't you understand? That is why it must be destroyed. And this is where we get to the real troubling aspect of this film. If you've seen my videos before, you know I'm not one of these guys that gets hung up on symbolism or pointing out, secret satanic imagery. And I'm not saying that stuff doesn't exist. It's just not what I do. In fact, I don't think I've even mentioned the concept of Satanism in any of these videos. I'm more of an expert on storytelling and on propaganda. I dissect what the story is telling the audience and how it's trying to inject ideas and themes into your head using propaganda techniques. But this film, in addition to being all the things that I've discussed before, this smearing of the past, hiding the body, is literally satanic. I don't mean that it's evil. I mean it's satanic, as in promoting Satan. This entire movie is the story of the Garden of Eden. And if you doubt what I'm saying now, you won't once we get a little further into this. It is the story of the Garden of Eden, and it's a celebration of Satan convincing Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge and getting cast out of paradise. This is a...
Let's take a minute and talk about that. In the Luciferian belief, bestowed upon us by old Aleister Crowley, basically, he perfected this belief. Now, I'm not too sure if he actually founded this belief, but in the Luciferian aspect, the serpent, or Satan, is the god in the garden that is good, because he's giving Eve and Adam the advantage of knowledge, for which Adonai, another term for God, wants to conceal from. Ignore the penis there, Andrew. I know you're staring at it. It's a portrait. It's a portrait,
Gosh.
all right? They like to use, they like to, it's the Renaissance, man.
I understand.
But anyways, Adonai is another term Hebraically for God. And God is considered to be the evil one that is attempting to conceal the potential for humanity effectively by not allowing them to bear from the fruit of forbidden truth and knowledge. They have to do this and that. They have to be obedient. So when he says that this movie is a boomer equivalent towards accepting the doctrine of the Garden of Eden and driving it further onto a defining idea that what happened with the Garden of Eden and the temptation that cast Adam and Eve out of paradise is celebrated as a good thing by quote unquote boomers. He's kind of got a point, going back to that Luciferian analogy of celebrating the serpent as the good and Adonai, God, as the bad. You're doing that's what Satan does. He's the trickster. He's a master manipulator. He's an agent of chaos. He flips
The
everything,
script.
and that's how you fall into a temptation of desire.
You know, I think an Enneagram 1 to 4 line of fixation is I don't do X. I don't uh, participate in a certain, actions or social activities. And that kind of feeds into what you're saying here is that he's flipping it. Like you said, he's flipped the script, right? Well, I don't play ball with God. And so if you want to play with me, you're going to have to play by my rules.
And if you don't understand what we're trying to say here in our commentary, I would just go listen to the song Mr. Crowley, and you'll get a deep dive articulation of what this belief is really all about. Old Ozzy Osbourne. I think he was more drugged out of his mind than he was satanic. I think he was just drugged out of his mind.
Well, I'm sure he had some serious issues from his, earlier days. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, when you sell your soul for fame and luxury, which is what he inevitably did, and he got that success, you're going to end up, the consequences are you're going to end up having some problems. That's why the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle ends up costing people in the end anyways.
Yeah.
A theme that is central in modern Satanism. In fact, here it is depicted in the satanic monument that was put on display recently in an American courthouse. This is the story. Now, I want you to think about what that means, not just for this movie, but also in the context of what I was talking about with destroying the culture. How could this movie simultaneously be satanic and also be propaganda meant to obscure the past? What does
I'm going to go off of this for a second. Knowledge is the greatest gift. Knowledge is not the greatest gift. As much as we are curious creatures, and God wants us to question, obviously, and explore to a certain extent and try to find truth. That's perfectly fine. Knowledge in itself can have a dire consequence to your psyche, your emotional health, even your physical health, when all you do is obsess. So knowledge is not the greatest gift. Love is. Love is the greatest gift. And you will find that if you follow in pursuit towards the aspect of love, you will eventually find knowledge in every capacity of every companionship that you make.
I can totally understand that, man.
Nothing else.
Well, I was thinking, type A challengers, denial is their defense mechanism, right? So
Mm-hmm.
trauma lives in the body. So when you process that trauma, you're gonna eventually overcome the denial and be forced to live with what you did or what you had to go through. So maybe knowledge isn't always the greatest gift. Maybe that's actually destructive to your person.
Because it leads to compulsive thinking and obsessive behavior, and that leads to a deterioration of the mind, which ultimately will lead to a physiological destruction of your body, because eventually that stress is going to begin to eat you away, quite literally. It's why people that are high stress have heart attacks. They have panic attacks that lead to heart conditions and heart attacks and heart disease. That's why people that are depressed, that possibly that find other niches to hide their depression, whether it's drugs, alcohol, food. I mean, if you gorge on food, what's the consequence of that, Andrew?
Well, obviously, you're gonna develop things like diabetes and heart disease.
Diabetes. Diabetes.
Yep.
Exactly. Yep. So there has to be a balance. You got to balance. You got to balance between love and knowledge. That's what this is. That's what life is all about, is finding a balance. And as we're going to see continuing on, and I promise, Andrew, I know you want to watch. I know everybody wants to watch. I'm going to cut this short, and we're just going to continue to watch at this point. But I think that is where this video is coming to a head on, is it's trying to define that rebellion against balanced human nature. Anything?
No, I mean, you make a good point.
Are you still thinking of the penis on the portrait again?
Absolutely.
I knew it. I knew you were gay. You're a gay Nigerian prince.
Absolutely. I don't know any other word besides absolutely. So absolutely.
Yeah, I knew you. I knew you were going to join Boko Haram. Have they given you your free assault rifle now that you've joined the auspices of Islam and Boko Haram in Nigeria?
Unfortunately, they had to deny it to me because I'm retarded.
Well, I mean, being retarded and being Muslim, yeah, that's kind of a double standard. They're just like the Nazis. They don't allow mentally handicapped in their religion.
I mean, there was that one loose connection after World War II. So,
There
or
was.
say
There was.
post, in between and post World War II. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Islam's retarded.
What does that tell you about the people who are responsible for destroying our culture? That they knew what they had was good, and they purposely destroyed it because, like modern Satanists, they valued exploring evil more than preserving good. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this right now because I think that I've planted that seed, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about as we go through the rest of the movie. It's pretty obvious. Okay, so back to the movie.
Don't look into her eyes, Andrew. Don't look into her eyes.
Too late.
She's like,
Too late.
she's like, oh, he's stoned now. It's like Medusa. The seductiveness, the attractiveness.
Her eyes
Turns
are
you into
temporary.
stone.
The glory of Rome is forever.
Yes. Rome is forever. Fuck Rome.
We are in paradise. Everything is way too perfect. Everyone is way too happy. There are no problems at all. That is until David tells Skip that maybe his sister isn't up for going out with him that evening. Now, that is when the first crack begins to form. They have poisoned the well by deviating from the routine that keeps this universe in order. The universe has skipped a gear. Now, worried that this might become a bigger problem if they continue to stray away from the script, David tells his sister that she has to go along with the routine to help preserve the order of the universe. Now, this is a metaphor for something else as well. This is a metaphor for what begins to happen to a society when outsiders come in and don't assimilate. They disrupt the order of things. Now, at first, it's in small, inconsequential ways, and the system will absorb some deviant behavior if the society is strong, but eventually, it begins to cause bigger and bigger problems until it threatens the existence of the society entirely. This is an aspect of the world that this film also exaggerates. It paints the routine as something bad and extremely rigid. It dictates the behavior of the native population to extremes. For example, when David shows up to work a little bit late, we discover that his boss has been stuck wiping the counter for hours and hours because David wasn't there to do his part of the routine, so he got stuck until David arrived. Later that night, Jennifer, who was annoyed with her date treating her respectfully and not trying to have sex with her, which is an odd thing to see considering how nowadays they've perverted the past even further and told us how people like Chip here would have just raped her by now. She demands that he take her to Lover's Lane. In this scene, Jennifer actually rapes Chip by today's definition. I'm not kidding. That's literally what happens. But of course, it's okay because she's a woman. Lover's Lane is the Garden of Eden. We will see this again later in the film in a more literal and obvious sense, but Jennifer, in her pursuit for pleasure, has decided to disrupt the universe and just have sex with this boy she just met. And because this is a baby boomer's view of what is good and bad in culture, this is celebrated as the best thing that has ever happened in this paradise. Eve has just taken the apple and given it to Adam. They have now both eaten the forbidden fruit, and the universe is beginning to change. Where there was once black and white, good and evil, new, ambiguous colors are beginning to appear. Now, the subversive force that has entered their universe begins to spread as Skip tells his teammates about the forbidden fruit. And slowly we see the world that was too perfect and too happy. It begins to slip away. David is alarmed when he sees what's happening and he begs his sister to stop destroying the universe. But Jennifer, who values her own whims and her own wants and her own desires over the good of the society around her, just ignores him. So it's not long before all of the kids are going to the Garden of Eden and partaking of the forbidden fruit. It's all about pleasure seeking and free love, and if it destroys the universe, that's okay. More and more, the subversiveness spreads, but of course, it's good. You see, it's good because it's more vibrant, it's more colorful, it's not this dark, drab black, or even worse, white world that you're a complete idiot if you want. These changes are good because they're different. And these changes don't go unnoticed. It was only a matter of time before the evil white patriarchy caught wind of these differences in their universe. Whenever they show the mayor the embodiment of the white male patriarchy, they frame the shot like an actual comic book villain. Never are we asked, by the way, to walk in his shoes, what he might think of his world being turned upside down. These men who created and maintain this paradise are just automatically evil. Their sin, creating and maintaining a perfect world. The women are also noticing changes, but since women aren't part of the patriarchy, they are the victims. The victims of the perfect world that their patriarchy created for them, trapped in this maddeningly happy existence. And when Jennifer gives the forbidden fruit to her mother by telling her about sex and explaining how to masturbate, the subversive force that she's brought with her into this world strikes again. This time, a tree in their front yard just catches fire. This is a new problem the community has never had to deal with before. David goes and gets the firemen, but they've never actually had to fight a fire before. This was paradise, and there were no fires in paradise. So David shows him how to put out the fire and is given an award by the mayor in this scene, where we also notice the first symbol to overtly call attention to the whiteness of the town. Now, everyone in Pleasantville is white, so it's only natural for the logo on that banner to show two white hands shaking, but it still sticks out because it's a logo that's been used so often in our world to represent multiculturalism, you know, the white and the brown hand shaking, that simply by having two white hands shaking, it sticks out like a sore thumb. This will come into play in more overt ways later in the film, but I just wanted to point it out now. I also want to point out this is part of David's story arc. See, David, in the beginning, he really likes Pleasantville. He likes it the way that it is. I mean, after all, he's a white male. He's being recognized here by the patriarchy for putting out the fire, because the fire was caused by the new subversive forces that are changing the community. He's being tempted to join the evil patriarchy that wants to preserve the existing culture. So now that he's been tempted by the patriarchy, he goes to work and he is tempted by the subversive forces in town. This is where a maddening bit of irony in today's context begins. David discovers that all the books in town are blank until he tells the stories of the books that he's read. That's when the books magically fill in. He's spreading forbidden knowledge into the town, which starts a new trend of people reading. This, of course, is very much frowned upon by the evil patriarchy, who doesn't like the free flow of information. You see, even though this was made just 20 years ago, this was when the left fancied themselves the defenders of free speech. How times have changed. The truth is that they only want free speech if it helps them subvert a society. After that, free speech has to go. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Basically, David's mom is forced to wear makeup to hide the fact that now that she's sexually liberated, she's now in color. David brings an art book to his boss at the diner. Almost all of the art is either garbage abstract art or sexual in nature, of course. David is becoming more and more confident and asks a girl out. Jennifer is also changing. She's evolving in the same way the feminism she represents evolved. She's changing from being sexually liberated to wanting to get serious about her education so she can grow up to be a strong, independent woman. Now, of course, that she's turned the universe upside down, she's going to see what other resources she can squeeze out of it. Now we get to the part where David goes on his date, or rather he goes to the Garden of Eden with his date. This is a kind of turning point in this universe and in the film. It's just like the Garden of Eden story in the Bible and in...
Okay, I got to interrupt on this because first off, when they start colorizing everything in this movie, the Lover's Lane Park does look like it would be a paradise, like the Garden of Eden. So perfect concept. Another thing that he's about to get to and explaining in this movie, there really is a scene where she goes and plucks an apple and hands it to Adam. So I want to know your perspective before we go into this. From what we have learned at this point, what do you think?
Well, it goes back to like when we had our episodes about the Enneagram of personality, right? 8 is criminal behavior, secure control, and with a 7 wing, that's no impulse control whatsoever. And then 5, like I said before, it's the pervert. So of course that line of fixation, it would flip the script, and that's kind of what they're doing in this movie.
5 is
and seven is driven by fetishization of things. There's never enough. There's always to be something new and interesting going on. So
are you saying Sigmund Freud is correct that humans are just sexually perverted creatures in nature and psyche?
Not always, not in every instance. It really depends on how the person was raised.
Oh, I know that, but at the same time, it's just interesting that you say that because Sigmund Freud, that's basically how he gathered his concepts for his idea around psychoanalysis. Everything was sexual in nature, from the crib to from the womb to the tomb.
Yeah,
we're just
I
sexual creatures, which we have to be. I mean, obviously, in order to procreate and expand the species, sure, we are sexual creatures, but you don't have to go too far on it. You don't have to be a pervert. Let's just put it that way. I
Well, I'm
cut
just
you off.
saying
Go
that
ahead.
no, I was just saying, that is it's a function, right? It
Hmm.
it depends on how the person is raised. If they're more of the type one, a reformer, they're going to have that more in line. And the further left you go in the Enneagram personality from 1 to 9 to 8, the more radical the person becomes,
Did you
the
just say
more
that the
loose
further
their
left?
moral.
Did
Like
you just say the
I'm
further
saying,
left you go? Let me
counterclockwise.
let me finish. You said that the further left you go, you become more radical. That's
Oh,
interesting
eight
you
wing
say that
seven
because yeah,
is considered the radical, the
yeah.
hard line opinion.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is like it's very interesting that you stated that because historically, in terms of what we call anarchism, anarchy was on the left
Yeah.
because the order of the day was on the right, but the right historically was order of tyranny. So basically what you're ascribing to is the further left you go to become too radicalized, the more that you will eventually full circle back to the extreme right to create order through tyranny.
Well, type 7, which is the enthusiast, is what I'm talking about before, about, the fetishization and all that. Uh, they're the liberty-minded. They're the the Peter Pan syndrome, where they're never really grown up. It takes them a long time to
Mhm.
really reach that level of maturity. And in type 8, like I said, their neighbors, they had to grow up way too soon, and they basically grew up in a war zone, right? So that they lean into one another and influences the actions and the behaviors of the person in general. So that
That's
it would make sense that the authoritarian and the liberty-minded people would not be, they would be right there next to each other, psychologically speaking.
define liberty.
Well, I mean, when I say liberty, I mean it really depends on the context. So, from my perspective, liberty is the right to act and build things that better society, but is voluntary.
These people aren't liberty. They weren't for liberty. They're liberty of the self. They're enslaved by their mentality and their desires, their pleasures. They're slaves.
Narciss-
They're slaves to the
it,
self. So you're not free. Whatever you perceive like individual freedom, I mean, and I'm going to derail you, libertarians. Individual freedom is actually responsibility for oneself and how you drive towards exclusively benefiting those around you for your culture, for yourself, for your family. And you're effectively your only natural right is to divorce from sickness, effectively. Liberty that most libertarians try to argue about is libertinism. That is, you can do as you please without any consequence. You forget that there are consequences in life. So, as Andrew stated, voluntary is wonderful in the effect of working to fulfill a needs to bettering oneself and their community and their family on a voluntary mechanism, acknowledging consequences of your actions because not everything that you do, e- even if voluntary, is going to have positive consequences. Not everybody's going to accept your help. But libertinism, this aspect that the individual can do whatever the hell they damn well please, is not freedom. It's hedonism.
I mean, that was the French Revolution, right?
Yes. Get right with God, libertarians, and acknowledge what real liberty is in yourself. not the Enlightenment era of the liberals that gave us hedonistic self-satisfaction, because that is how a society decays. We don't need libertarianism. We need human beings being human beings. And that's all I have to say. Anything else before you continue, Andrew?
Well, I think about Voltaire, right? I mean, he kind of personified what I was talking
Pedophilia.
about with that
He was a
too.
pedophile.
But I'm
So
just
was
saying,
Rousseau. Go
it's
ahead.
the mindset. It's the mindset. It's your behavior. It's if you're not going to benefit anybody, but only take, you're running the risk of long-term consequences for your own existence.
Beautiful. Let's continue.
Satanism. Eventually, God finds out his children have been eating the forbidden fruit, and the town is about to be kicked permanently out of paradise. While David is in the Garden of Eden with Eve, his mother, who's walking around, notices some artwork that the diner owner has now started to paint on the windows of the diner and starts an affair with him. Because her husband, the man who helped provide and maintain the paradise, was, of course, part of the evil patriarchy. Never once are the needs of her husband ever even imagined, thought about, considered at a single point ever. Why? Because he's the enemy. He's an evil white male. Now, at the same time, Jennifer, she's had her fun with Skip, and because he's also an evil white male, she rejects him. And because he's just some stupid white guy with no feelings, he walks away, and so what? Just like David's father, who comes home to an empty house for the first time ever, and he wanders through the home not knowing what to do. And now with this crescendo of everything going wrong in the universe, we see unmistakable imagery that should once and for all convince you that this is the Garden of Eden. Eve literally plucks the fruit from the tree and brings it to Adam/David. And that's when God shows up. For the first time in paradise, there is a storm. The rain falls over the entire town, and they are all at once and forever cast out of paradise. David's dad goes and alerts the patriarchy about what's happening. The evil white patriarchy, all lit and framed like comic book villains, are dismissed as reactionary bigots. Their concerns about being, forever thrust out of paradise are completely minimized, as one of the men shows them that his wife burnt his shirt, and that's the worst thing that's happened to him. That's the worst thing that happened to these people that maintained a paradise that was perfect, that everyone was happy. They lost it, and really all they lost was, ironed shirts. So you see, the only reason the men wanted to maintain the way things were was so they could have dinner and neatly pressed shirts. The patriarchy is domineering and evil and only wants to preserve paradise because they're oppressing everyone else. Now, the next day, David's mother leaves his dad, her husband of God knows how many years, for the guy she just met and had an affair with. And again, his father, whose only sin was providing a good life for his family and being a good husband and father, is ridiculed and put down. His needs are not as important as his wife's whims. The subversive new culture has completely taken hold, and paradise is gone. And now in this multicultural reality, and I said multicultural, they're all white, but some of the people are now in color. And the filmmakers use this as a not so subtle metaphor for people of color, as we see when David is hassled by some evil white kids that don't like that he has a colored girlfriend. Now the town calls a meeting, no coloreds allowed, of course, and with heavy-handed fascist symbolism, using lighting and framing that looks like it's right out of Triumph of the Will, We see the patriarchy rear its ugly, bigoted head. The symbol of the white hands shaking is more obvious now than ever. These angry fascists, they just don't like the changes because they want their shirts to be ironed. And now they need to stop it because they want their dinner cooked by their wives. Things begin to escalate in town. The white kids even try to lynch David's mother, who is now a person of color. And because he stands up to the white fascists, David himself finally becomes a person of color. And now we return to the complete irony where the white fascists begin to burn the books of the colored people. It amazes me how quickly the left has become a parody of themselves. They are the burners of books. This right here should be all the proof that you should ever need that the left projects. They project this fear on their enemies because that's exactly what they're going to do. And you know this because this is exactly what they started doing 20 years after making this. So understand that. Now, after some clashes, the town holds a trial to see what they should do about these new people of color. This is where the movie copies almost exactly the shots used in the film To Kill a Mockingbird, a movie about racist whites who attempt to imprison an innocent black man. At this point, it's obvious what the film is saying. The real reason the paradise was evil and it had to be destroyed because it was white. And white is intrinsically evil. And it's not until every last white person is changed into a person of color that the town can accept this new culture that subverted their paradise. Whites might have functioned well and been happy in the paradise they built and maintained until the outsiders showed up, the outsiders who didn't like this paradise. But now they have to be eradicated one by one for this new culture, which is incompatible with the whites apparently. I don't know how much clearer the filmmakers could make this. This movie isn't just an excuse for destroying the past or propaganda that seeks to counter that yearning to gain back what was thrown away so carelessly by the baby boomers. It's a blueprint for the future. It's both a confession and a prophecy. Generation X and those that followed never experienced that paradise lost, and they never will. They will slowly be replaced until every last remnant of that world has changed and slipped away forever. This movie is telling you all of that. This movie is telling you that loud and clear, all the while giving a not so subtle nod to Satanism. And the most amazing thing of all of this is they managed to communicate all of this in an easy to swallow package that people paid money to see. And chances are, if you watch this movie, even after you've seen this, they did this so well that if you watch this movie, you might even still laugh at some of the charming jokes. Never again let it be said that the left can't meme. And in this case, the people behind the film and others like them didn't just bury the body. They convinced the younger generation to help them dig the grave. For Blackpilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you
The left can't meme.
Well,
They
I
tried.
think about, we talk about the left, right? And look at the USSR, what they did. Anybody who had an argument, they would bring people in and dilute the conversation by mixing the population and making it almost impossible for you to get your voice heard.
Well, also
And that's
look what
what
the Soviet Union did. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's something that matches with what he's saying in this video.
Well, there's another thing that the Soviet Union or the Bolsheviks did uh, in Russia, specifically as their era began. They were the first to unilaterally and nationally institute sterilization programs as well as promote abortion, for which now you are starting to see Russia in a time still. So they're standing still in time. And to a certain extent, if you want to look at the Ukraine situation and why they had to act now, is their population is dwindling. They have a crisis. And so, one aspect of them fulfilling the niche of opening up and taking as much as they can of Ukraine, bringing in a population, um, is on that idea of what the Bolsheviks began, those extermination tactics through covert means, through sterilization techniques, through abortion rhetoric, and it's caused them to now, here in the 21st century, to be a little worried
Yeah.
because they do have a population standstill. They aren't having enough babies, and so there is a true sense of what the Russians are doing, say in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, where they are literally smuggling, they're kidnapping and smuggling Ukrainian children into Russia to indoctrinate them in the ways of the Russian. Not to say, I'm not saying that Ukraine is good. By all means, I'm not. But you have to look at it through the lens of a gray area. It's not all black and white. Russia isn't good. Ukraine isn't good. Stop being a Russian bot. Stop being Ukraine bot. Look into the
Yeah, to
gray
be
area.
indifferent to the political
Mhm.
motivations of this
Mhm.
generation, the last couple generations, and understand the realistic on the ground situation that's
Mhm.
been a result of this poor mismanagement of power, because power
Yes.
always
Yeah.
mismanages. It doesn't matter they're the way they're fixed. Power always ruins.
And that's what goes to the keynote of this commentary is within the Garden of Eden, the temptation of Eve and inevitably Adam, they took the apple that was given to them by the serpent, not necessarily given to them, but the serpent gave them the audacity to ignore God's warning. They bared the fruit because they wanted power. They were tempted in the power to be of the true likeness of the Lord, equal footing. They could be like gods. They could be like God, and power corrupts. You can never be like God. You will never be all knowing. You will never be all powerful. The consequences of your actions is you will fall. No matter how high you go on that roller coaster, you're going up. But as soon as you get to the peak, what happens? You got to go down.
I'm going to be a little counterfactual in this interpretation. The only real use for power is that you bring other people against you, is you concentrate unity amongst other people.
That's the whole idea. You want everybody against you because if they're against you, they're against each other. They're not unified. They're only going against you because they want what you have. I mean, think of what the left's narrative right now with the tax the wealth scenario, which has always been a rhetoric and Bolshevikism. Anyways, it's a means to get everybody on board to go against the rich, eat the rich, as they say. But inevitably, who are the ones that get taxed? Who are the ones whose labor gets stolen from?
The poorest of the poor.
Exactly. So they use that mechanism that they have through their power and their authority, their perceived authority, to enforce the plebes to do their bidding. They need this unity. If we're divided, then it's easier to conquer. And inevitably, from my belief, it's really just Satan trying to fulfill the needs that we go against God and separate ourselves from God so that we do not spend eternity with Him in relationship, in service of each other in paradise. Because that's what paradise is. Whether upon this earth that you can attempt to mimic, you're never going to mimic. Utopia is not a fallacy, or utopia is a fallacy in the material world. The only utopia that will be of standing is the perfection of heaven. Only God can give us utopia. But we can mimic it to a certain extent while understanding we're never going to be perfect. We are imperfect beings on this natural, chaotic, material world.
That's pretty much it, man.
Why are you so depressing, man? Get excited.
Because I'm black pilled.
W-
But you got to look for the
Why
white
are
pill
you?
after the black pill. Black
Yeah,
pill
you got to
isn't
look
forever,
for the.
baby.
Exactly. Be excited. Exclaim out, I am a child of God. It's just like
Yeah.
the SpongeBob meme.
Yeah.
I'm ugly and I'm proud. Say it, Andrew.
I am a child of God.
There you go. Say it again.
I am a child of God.
And that's the truth. We're all children of God. So let's live like it and acknowledge that nothing can be perfect, but we can make the best of a bad situation into something wholesome. Not necessarily good, but acknowledge that the good is to come. The reward is not of this world, but we can at least elevate ourselves up to acknowledging our faults and living for each other rather than this hedonistic idea that we are better than each other, that we are better than God. We are not better than anybody. We are human fucking beings. We
We're
have our
all
faults.
flawed.
Yep, we're all flawed. We make our mistakes. We just have to build upon those mistakes. When you fail, boomers, when you fail, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, when you fail, that doesn't mean the end of the world. That means
Failure.
you get up, you dust your ass off, you put your shoes back on, strap them up, and get the fuck out there and start going harder.
Failure is the roadmap to success. You have to fail in order to figure out what doesn't work.
Thank you. Who said that? Ludwig von Mises?
No, I don't know who said it. I just know it. It sounds pretty. No,
It sounds pretty. Yeah. Although I think Mises did say something similar. But still, you have to fail to be a success. So with that, I think that concludes. Unless you have anything more to say.
no. I mean, I think it's always a good episode on it. We can do Black Build. He's got some good content, so it will do some more in the future.
We'll do some more in the future. So he's still making content. So with that, I implore you all to like and share this content. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's just pursue the knowledge that we all are pursuing and help each other out, expand and cultivate and bring about discourse. If there's something that you don't like us saying and you have a different perspective, lay it out in the comments on Rumble and YouTube and tell us we're idiots. tell us that you're both a couple of spoiled, entitled brats, and then I will come back in the comments and say, "Are you a boomer, spoiled brat?"
I am a
And
spoiled
then we
brat.
can have a
Eat water.
fight. Yeah. So, but like I said, we're all spoiled in some capacity. I will say that we are spoiled because what the previous generation is meant to fulfill the needs to better the next generation. The problem is the boomers stopped. I don't know why. They wanted it all for themselves and they didn't want to give it back. That's why I call the boomers the me culture. Me, me, me. I have mine. You go away. Stay off my shit. It's mine. Mine, mine, mine.
In trading,
999.
it's the 999 plan. Oh man, in trading, it's called a blow off top or a failed rally.
Exactly. Speaking of failed rally, triumph of will. Triumph at will. He mentioned that in the little clip. So, anything else to say, Andrew?
Nope. Thanks for watching,
Oh,
guys. It's been a great episode.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Enjoy this episode as it comes out. Enjoy this episode for later. As I said, share this content amongst your friends, your family, anybody around your communities, online or not. Share it. Get this message out, and let's get some conversation going. And one last thing, I'm gonna plug. If you, it'll be in the description. But if you do want to support us, you're supporting us by listening to us. But if you want to help us keep doing this, and and give us incentive to go bigger and better, in my opinion, maybe get some even better guests on instead of you listening to us. Um, why don't you go to our locals, Legacy Right, or our Substack, Legacy Right. It'll all be in the description below, and give us some money, man. Donate with your heart, voluntarily, of course. I'm not trying to push you, but if you want to support us monetarily on our locals or join us on our locals and our Substack, we are in the process of trying to get involved on that so we can give you some extra like away from this. Maybe if you start donating, we're going to make you a premium user and do some content for you only. Maybe with you, actually. Actually, I like that better. Why give content just for you when me and Andrew can just invite you on and then you're on, and then we do a show with you for everybody else that's not on that's paying for it. Trade offs, baby.
And then to get rid of this baldness of mine.
But yeah, if you ever feel the urge to support us over on our locals and our Substack, it's there and it's in the description down below. So just check out down below. Other than that, keep watching, keep supporting us your own way, and just keep sharing that content with your friends and your family online and offline. Let's get this message expanded, and let's expand some knowledge in the positive path, not the devil's path. Other than that, there is an old man behind you, Andrew, and he looks angry.
The only boomer that counts.
Is he a boomer? I thought he was a little older than a boomer. He looks like he's in his 90s. I think that's beyond boomer.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Why is
Maybe
he
I'm wrong.
behind you, standing behind you with a big, giant, pink polka dotted purple dildo? He's about to slap you in the head with it.
God,
Do
help
not
me.
look.
No,
Do not look.
up. Why?
Do not.
Why do I have?
Because he's about to. Don't look.
Okay.
He's about to slap you. Yeah. He's about. Oh no! He's about to stick it in the hole in your chair. I'm sorry, man.
I'm going to have to leave now, but I was sure I came in by that door over there. Hey, man, where's the door to get out of here?
Oh, it's right over there, sir.
Right over where?
The exit sign? Exit sign? It's that door right there.
That red sign?
Yeah, just go right that way.
Okay.
I think you went down the wrong door.
Where am I? Hey, what the fuck's wrong with you? That's not the right door.
Sir, you're gonna want to go to the one with the exit. You went to the door to the side there. That's
I went to the right doors and where you pointed me to, you fuck.
I pointed you to the exit.
Man, you're fucking with the wrong guy.
I'm sorry.
You see this bulge on my hip? You know what that is?
That's a gun.
That's a Glock. You're fucking with the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Don't ever send me to the wrong door.